Humpty Doo Barramundi is on the land of the First Nations Walna Limalingang people. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the country and pay respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We acknowledge the elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the spirits and ancestors of the clans that live in the Humpty Doo area.
Well, the first thing about barramundi is they're a good fish to farm. You've got a really good product that will last a long time and retain its quality and is both safe and good value. So they're really an ideal fish for farming.
This is Fishtales, a seafood podcast. I'm John Susman. Is there a fish that invokes as much national pride as the mighty barramundi? Although it's a species that occupies a wide geographic range, from the Arabian Gulf to China and Taiwan, and to Papua New Guinea, and all across northern Australia, it is the Northern Territory that is the cultural, some might even say the spiritual home of this mighty fish. Barramundi, despite being referred to by various names in other parts of the world, is an Aboriginal word for large-scaled silverfish that has become the ubiquitous international name for this delicious and versatile fish. Barramundi farming is the second largest aquaculture activity in the north of Australia after marine prawn farming. Among the attributes that make barramundi an ideal candidate for aquaculture are that it is a relatively hardy species which can flourish in a range of water conditions. It tolerates crowding and has wide physiological tolerances. It's a hardy feeder, grows relatively quickly, and the high breeding rate of the female fish provides plenty of material for the hatchery production of fingerlings. Although the barramundi farming industry has only been going since around 1986, there is a pioneering couple without whose vision, perseverance and downright faith in the fish, the industry might not be in the place it is today, as the second largest finfish farming species in Australia. Bob Richards and Julie Tyson have built Humpty Doo Barramundi from a small, almost cottage business to being one of the largest barramundi farming operations in the world.
Hi, I'm Bob Richards, Managing Director of Humpty Doo Barramundi, and I'm speaking to you from Darwin. I grew up in Darwin doing there wasn't much to do in Darwin in those days except go fishing and play sport. And so I grew up as a keen fisherman. I also used to do a lot of gardening with my father and went and did an agricultural science degree because I was interested in farming and food production and that side of things. I then worked for a number of years for the Northern Territory government in soil conservation and which included in those days a lot of environmental aspects such as mine rehabilitation and controlling access to sensitive areas and that sort of thing. I did quite a bit of backpacking through Southeast Asia, South America, and drove all around North America and worked as an environmental consultant in Canada for about 15 months, where I brought to a highly professional expertise packed group, I think a pragmatic way of dealing with things that weren't of global significance because they were set up for absolutely major, huge projects, whereas I was used to dealing with, only sort of multi-million-dollar mines and things like that, not sort of billion-dollar pipelines and things, So I had a bit that kind of an environmental background. And then I had an opportunity when I visited a friend to become a shareholder in a startup barramundi fund. And it was something I hadn't ever really thought about, but when I did think about it, I understood it would be a long journey and I knew the risks, but I was excited by the potential.
The popularity and demand for barramundi made it an obvious candidate for aquaculture. Apart from the characteristics that endear it to the consumer, tender, mild-tasting and relatively forgiving to abuse from the amateur cook, the fish is also fast-growing and can be grown in salinities ranging from fresh to seawater. This was seen as a valuable attribute for a species being raised in areas subject to monsoonal conditions. For Bob Richards, an agricultural scientist with a career in soil conservation, his belief in the barramundi as an aquaculture species took him on a journey that would become a life's work.
Look, there was a number of farms already established in Queensland, largely cane farmers who had existing land and equipment and accommodation and access to water and quite a good extension service. And so the industry was underway in Queensland, and several years down the track when we joined, a friend of mine had started the farm and the previous year, and they'd put a few ponds in, and so it was just the early stages of the journey for the Northern Territory. He was looking for an investor, and I basically decided that I was interested and managed to convince my wife that it was something we should do, even though she came off a farm and probably had a better understanding of the difficulties ahead. But that was it. There were 4 1/10 of a hectare ponds that had water exchange with the rise and fall of the tide. So basically when the tide came in, water would come in, and when the tide went out, water would go out. It was a reliable water exchange system, but you didn't have much control over water flow. And also there was a few things that we didn't actually have any real control over visitors either. So crocodiles would regularly walk in from the river and raid the ponds of the few fish we had. And when the first flood occurred, I kind of stood there and watched the floodwaters come in and watched all the fish swim out of the ponds. And so initially we had a lot of trouble producing fingerlings, and we didn't know very much about. I didn't know very much about fish farming, so it was the beginning of a long journey. But within 18 months, we were actually producing and selling some fish, so the show was on the road.
Humpty Doo is a small village 40 kilometres southeast of Darwin on the stunning Adelaide River. Humpty Doo, like the rest of the outer Darwin area, experiences a tropical savanna climate with 2 distinct seasons. The wet season, when tropical thunderstorms pass through most days, and the dry season, where it's hot, damn hot and dry.
The site we're on is on the Adelaide River floodplain, so we're down into the tidal reaches of the Adelaide River, and what you've actually got is the floodplain there is about 7 kilometres wide and very flat, and the river meanders down the river of it. It's a very typically, windy type river, and we own a couple of kilometres of river frontage and going back in about 3 kilometres, so we've got about 700 hectares, and it turns out it was a good location for a barramundi farm. It only floods rarely and relatively shallowly, the floodplain. We're still in a tidal zone of the river, so there's heaps of water in the river. It's a couple hundred metres wide and moving all the time. We've got access to salt water, and so it turned out we actually had opportunity where there was going to be able to grow. And in the 1950s and 60s, it was developed as a rice farm as part of the Humpty Doo rice project. The actual project failed, but we've still got rice paddies and contour banks and channels and things, residual stuff, gradually being worn away, but there's still remnants of those. It was also an area where a very large feral buffalo population built up prior to the introduction of the eradication program associated with the bovine tuberculosis control program in the 70s. So it's got a history of buffalo hunting and rice farming, and obviously a long Indigenous tradition before that.
Bob Richards is a true visionary, a long-term thinker who had ideas for the potential of Humpty Doo Barra when it was just a couple of ponds and a handful of fish. His continual pursuit for innovation drove the farm, the family, and some say the industry to become what it is today.
We continued to do more of what we had been doing, and then we decided to, with the problem with tidal exchange, whilst tidal exchange was cheap and reliable, it wasn't very productive because you couldn't really control the amount of water that your fish were exposed to. So we went to a flow-through process where we actually started pumping water from the river into our ponds and then draining it back into the river. And that increased productivity. A real breakthrough occurred when the first World Aquaculture Conference was outside in the United States was held in Sydney. And Julie and my wife Julie and I were able to attend it, and we suddenly became aware of a lot more possibilities of different ways to do things. And at that stage, we built a very large pond for zero water exchange, which was based on the methods used by the American catfish farmers, and that was very successful at growing fish, but it was very difficult to catch them in this huge pond. And so we continued to experiment until we came to the system we've got now, which is basically recirculation pond aquaculture, whereby we grow our fish in ponds, but we have sort of artificially created wetland systems where we treat the water so our environmental discharges are minimal, but we can keep good quality salt water in our ponds to grow our fish in. And so it was kind of a win-win-win in a way, because it gives us probably a higher degree of biosecurity than if we're exchanging water all the time. It minimises our environmental impact, and we don't have to worry so much about events that are happening in the river in terms of floods and water quality changes and so on. So we've more or less got built and maintain our own healthy ecosystem to grow our fish in.
Returns to aquaculture farming enterprises are influenced by risks and uncertainty, which are inherent to aquaculture production. Growing an aquaculture business demands equal measures of belief and gumption, an ability to see off the dramatic challenges that the environment, the market, staff and the fish can throw up. To keep growing a business year after year for nearly a quarter of a century is a rare feat in the seafood industry, let alone in a pioneering one.
Look, our growth has been at a good rate, pretty much from the very start. In terms of percentage-wise, we growth rates of around 30-50% have been the common factor. But if you're growing 100 kilos of fish a year, if you double your production, that's going from 100 to 200. If you're growing 1,000 kilos a year, 1,000 tons a year, then going from 1,000 tons to 2,000 tons, percentage-wise, it's the same. But obviously, in terms of the amount, it's massively different. And so our rate of growth has remained high, but the accurate increments, the growth steps have got to be much bigger over time. And so consequently, we've had to get more efficient in the way we run the farm and to build markets and develop good relationships with our business partners on all fronts. Keep in touch with the community so that they know what's happening, and address concerns through information, to embark on a staff development program and trying to ensure that things like, including Indigenous participation and a wide social access. We've now got quite a few, a higher proportion of women than we've ever had working for us, and we're also becoming more professional as we move away from just straight technology transfer and operations into a better understanding of how to integrate our business with our environment at a biological level, I suppose, an ecological level.
Cult status of the barramundi is justly deserved. The flavour and texture of well-handled barramundi make for a truly unique eating experience. It's a special fish, as beautiful in reality as in the dreams of many anglers and chefs. Its broad flaking flesh, mild sweet flavour and medium texture have seen it grown in popularity to become the second most important farmed fish after salmon in many parts of the world.
Well, the first thing about barramundi is they're a good fish to farm. You can produce significant numbers of them relatively cheaply in the rearing stage. So a single mating can produce literally millions of fertilised eggs and hundreds of thousands of juveniles, which means that there's a bit of you can scale up numbers without having to have fast hatchery resources, and you can kind of select the better fish. Barramundi come from this part of the world, and part of their life cycle often involves them being stranded in hot anaerobic type environments, and so they're adapted to the tough conditions that is presented in this part of the world for fish that spend part of their time in their life cycle in freshwater. So they're good tough fish. They've got good growth rates and they've got a good fillet recovery percentage. So they're all in all, on the production side, they're a good fish to grow. On the other side, they're a very popular eating fish, nice and meaty, not overly fishy, exceptionally good shelf life, and being a tropical species, their enzymes and the bacteria they've got are all thermophilic. They're hot water adapted. So once you chill them down to get them cold, basically harvest them gently, give them as comfortable a death as you can, sort of thing, and get them cold quickly. Keep your whole process very clean, and you've got a really good product that will last a long time and retain its quality and is both safe and good value. So they're really an ideal fish for farming.
One of the distinct advantages of fish farming is in being able to manage the quality of the fish from egg to pack. While ensuring fish health throughout its growth is a significant task for fish farmers, the process of harvesting can have a significant impact on the final fish eating quality. Skilled handling techniques and specialised tools ensures that the farm can literally control not only the texture of the fish, but also the visual appearance, the smell and the flavour. This practice of a considered kill is as important as the growth and final preparation of the fish.
Well, originally we harvested fish by swimming small nets into the to catch the fish gently, sort of thing. So we'd have two people swimming with a sort of a seine net or a beach seine, and then would physically pick up and examine each fish and select which fish to keep for market and which ones to return into the pond and stuff like that. So it's incredibly intensive. From that, we moved to gill netting, where we had gill nets in basically in big ponds, and on one side we could put a vehicle, but on the other side somebody would have to be walking through the mud in the deep mud in the centre of the pond, and actually we'd physically haul the net out and load it onto a trailer, and then take it back to the shed and then run the net, and each fish had to be removed from a gill net, which is it's hard on the people and hard on the fish. So that was basically the next stage. From that, we moved to brailing, whereby we'd actually at the same time we're bringing our pond sizes down, so we've got more control over our fish, and our harvests are getting quicker and much more precise. And so we'd crowd fish up and then brail them out by scooping them up in a net. A couple of people dressed in armour would go in and scoop the fish up, and then a crane would lift them out in a net and drop them into an ice slurry, and then in the later stage, basically crowding them up and pumping them into the slurries. So as we've gone on, we've got systems that are more efficient, gentler on the fish, and less hazardous to the operators.
Growing a beautiful fish is only one part of the equation. Being able to sell it is another. With a long history and abundant supply of wild harvest fish, the culinary reputation of barramundi was often dependent on the vagaries of seasons, locations, when and who caught it, and often with mixed results. Convincing the market of the consistency, continuity and quality of Humpty Doo Barramundi was a long journey, requiring many in-market partnerships and a lot of time talking to fishmongers, chefs and consumers.
Oh, well, increasingly we find our fish on the menu pretty well all over Australia, really, which is really pleasing. Sometimes we mention it to the people that are serving us and get a bit of feedback from them, which is almost universally positive. So it's rewarding after a very long and hard journey. I think Sydney Fish Market was and probably still is. We don't sell much on the floor anymore, but Sydney Fish Market gave you a way of getting your product out there where there was a competitive bidding process. And I think that was, and they ran a pretty good handling and quality control, and they paid quickly and stuff like that. I think Sydney Fish Market's got a big thing. There were companies such as Johto that we had relationships with who were loyal customers who we tried to never let down because they supported us, and so we supported them. In recent times, we've got a split between retail, which is including the Woolworths and Costco and big distribution businesses, and then also the fish agents that supply the top end of the fish market around Australia, such as Clams and Fish Boys and other quite a few others too. That pulled that whole relationship where we try to ensure reliability and quality, and then they will promote our product and support our product because it's good for them too. It's always look for win-win.
Succession in a family business is perhaps the most critical challenge among the many unique challenges of a family business, especially when families are unprepared, lack global perspective, or are caught up in emotional issues. For the Richards family, these challenges have been tackled head-on with a symbiotic and often adversarial partnership approach between all members.
My wife Julie was in from the very start, and think it was a very hands-on operation in those days. My son Dan and subsequently his wife Taryn have joined the business, and Dan's now the CEO, and Taryn runs the business services part of the business, and so they're both graduates. They both also come from family businesses and that sort of thing, and that they understand the importance of getting the job done, not analysing things to death, but just taking action and looking for creative solutions. So it's been a fantastic thing to be in a situation where we have got that succession in place. My eldest son, Jim, is a graduate working at high level in government, but when we were stuck with a resignation at one time, he left his government job, got leave, and came in and helped us, and very efficiently ran the administration of the company for 6 or 8 months until we restabilised and got the show back on the road. So to a certain extent, it's a man the pumps type business, and we've been really supported. My eldest sister Anne, in the early stages, had came in and did our books for us and helped in various ways. My younger sister Joy and her husband were shareholders in the company, and in the early days when the shareholders, we all got wet and dirty because we had no money. So yeah, it is very much. And then I've also had a number of good friends, Mike and Sue Van Kylenberg and Ian Melville and other local people that were very good family friends, have been shareholders at times, and so yeah, it's these days it's just owned by myself, my 2 sons, and our respective wives. So it is very much a family business.
Successful people don't just work hard, they also work differently. Extremely successful people make the impossible possible, and they do it by being resourceful, creative. The Richards family have been at the forefront of innovation, driven by Bob's tireless desire to innovate and improve. They've worked closely with Charles Sturt University and the local Aboriginal people to build a long-term, sustainable and culturally sensitive workplace.
I have to give a lot of credit to a guy called Nick Ruello, who was a food scientist, but who grew up in Sydney Fish Market in the trade, in the family business, but did the training in fish science. And basically, he taught us the importance of maintaining really good hygiene and very good cool chain management, and basically getting your fish, keeping your fish really clean and getting them cold as quickly as possible, and making sure you're consistent so that the customer would always know what he's going to get. And so that was drilled into me relatively early, and we invested a lot in getting that quality into our product. So that was one of the main things. The second thing is reliability, because if somebody is depending on you as a supplier and you let them down, then they let their customers down, and suddenly, a restaurant or a shop or something doesn't have what they're used to getting, and then they are subject to vagaries in price and quality and stuff like that. So understanding that the relationship with people, other people in the chain, is critically important, and that being fair, honest, open, addressing problems honestly and trying to solve them is good business, and that I think we've really taken that on, and that also applies whether you're dealing with government agencies or your own employees or anything. That really we do try to ensure that communication is real and frank. Don't avoid the issues, but collaborate on the solutions. Don't get into the blame game and stuff like that. So I think that's a maturity thing we've developed over the years.
Bob Richards and Julie Tyson from Humpty Doo Barramundi have both been appointed to the Order of Australia for their services to aquaculture and the community. Indeed, fitting recognition for their huge commitment to the industry and the local people.
Well, the first thing I say is it came as an enormous surprise to Julie and I. We didn't have any inkling that it was in the pipeline, so we're very honoured and flattered by it. Look, that's probably the main thing, and I guess to some extent, perhaps we feel maybe we're the flag bearers too for a generation that got the industry up and established it and got it commercial. But there's been a lot of people who've done a lot along the way, and so I guess we regard it also as being a recognition not just of us, but of the pioneers who established a new industry in the country.
The husband and wife team of Bob Richards and Julie Tyson are a story of how vision and true grit pay off. The Richards family and the Humpty Doo Barramundi farm continue to grow, innovate, and take the local community with them on their remarkable journey. This is Fishtales, a seafood podcast. A Deep in the Weeds production. I'm John Susman. Follow us on Instagram at Fishtales Seafood Podcast or email us at fishtalespodcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay tuned for more tales from beneath the surface of the seafood world every Friday on your podcast app.